Russian sleep experiment. Soon after World War II ended, every major country was looking for ways to become the most powerful nation in whatever aspect they could. Science was being played around with in another league. Crazy experiments were being conducted all around the world to gain an advantage if ever there was another war they had to go to. In the name of biowarfare and powering up the armed forces, some countries indulged in quite questionable experiments. Most of them had live human subjects going through all of it. It is said that Russia and Japan were doing these kinds of experiments on a huge scale. Let's get into the details of one particular experiment that Russia was running unapologetically at the time: the Russian sleep experiment. The setup: in 1947, 5 prisoners of Soviet Russia who were booked for being enemies of the state were randomly picked from their cells and brought to a scientific research facility. The prisoners had no idea why they were gathered together at this facility. An authority figure came up to them and told them about this perfectly safe experiment that these prisoners were chosen to be a part of. They were told that all they had to do was not sleep for 30 days. If they could successfully achieve this feat, they would be released from all their charges and can get back to their lives. After listening to his offer, the prisoners were quite cheerful, and without thinking about it thoroughly, they agreed to the offer. Keep in mind, they were promised something that the authorities never intended to keep. However, the clueless prisoners had no way of knowing that they also didn't want to lose an opportunity of being free, thus none of them could afford to be a skeptic and explore their doubts. After they had taken this too good to be true offer, the prisoners turned participants were processed without wasting any time. They were all put together in a gas chamber. They were thoroughly instructed to follow a proper set of rules for the next 30 days, and in no circumstances were they allowed to break these rules. If caught doing so, the participants would immediately be dropped from the experiment, and the deal offered initially would be taken away as well. All the prisoners had made up their minds and were ready to go through this, all of it, so they could be free in the end. They were being set up for something so disturbing that could send down chills to anybody once they get the full picture. Following this, the participants were also exposed to a sleep-inhibiting stimulant without them having any knowledge of it. What happened next would shake every research agent and scientist involved. Initial days. Once the experiment started, all the prisoners seemed delighted as they were imagining their free life after just a small figure of 30 or so days. They would talk to each other excitedly about it, how they would spend the rest of their lives once they are free, and where they want to go after this. It was not superficial for them in any way. Every day in the chamber, the gas was released, which was meant to hold the prisoners from dozing off. The sleep inhibitor was a powerful stimulant, and it proved to be effective at the time. Everything was going fine until the 5th day. The researchers noticed that the prisoners were not joyful anymore about their promised freedom. They were not even talking about it anymore. Instead, they were sharing their trauma about the war, all the horrors they had been put through. With every passing moment, the conversation among them was taking a darker turn. The situation was getting out of hand rapidly. However, those scientists decided not to intervene, but rather just watch them and study their behavior in depth. The prisoners were losing their sanity, and the gas, which was meant to stop them from sleeping, wasn't just doing that, but turning them into a maniac as well. This gas we are talking about had been made during the World War II periods. It was designed to be a sleep-producing agent for the soldiers going to war. It had properties proven to deprive a soldier of sleep and make him more functional and useful. The prisoners now haven't slept in days and showed no sign of resistance to the gas. Soon enough, the scientists realized this is not what they had expected of the experiment. Nonetheless, not one of them wanted to drop the experiment right then and there. A decision to keep the experiment going on was made in consensus. The expected outcome. On the 7th and 8th days of the experiment, the prisoners had fallen into a deep state of psychosis. They were all hallucinating and were showing signs of mild schizophrenia. The mild, however, turned into an extreme case of schizophrenia in a matter of just 2 days. The mental state of these prisoners had demented so far that 2 of these prisoners were observed to be screaming so loud and for so long that they had broken their vocal cords. Whilst doing so, they were also running around in the chamber like ferals and continuously kept banging their heads on the walls. The scientists described the scenario as if they were looking at a chicken coop, with chickens replaced by humans. The prisoners had lost their way to humanity, and at this point, they had no way of returning to it. What surprised the researchers and scientists was not the loud screaming and psychopathic behavior of the prisoners, but rather the storm of silence that followed soon after it. There was absolute silence in the chamber. No shouting and screaming could be heard. Even the movements had stopped in the chamber. The scientists had thought the prisoners must have died and were about to give up on the experiment after they had let this debauchery go on for days. However, one prisoner was heard out of the blue, screaming something they couldn't have imagined in any way. The prisoner shouted at the top of his lungs, "We don't want freedom anymore." This left researchers puzzled and curious. They opened the chamber on the 15th day of the experiment, and what they witnessed at the moment was later described to be a most devilish and gruesome scenario. To describe the scene accurately, we might have to discuss the gore frequently, so buckle up, guys. When the researchers stepped in, the first thing that grabbed their attention was the dead body of a prisoner who was lying right in the middle of the chamber. His body was all torn up and ripped open, seeming to be a horror movie set. It was all very unreal, and the researchers could not believe their own eyes. The other 4 subjects were also missing chunks of flesh from their limbs, their fingertips were showing bones, and one of them had somehow managed to rip out a part of his forehead and feed on that flesh. As the researchers had to turn off the airborne stimulant when they entered the chamber, this is what the prisoners had to say about it. They were begging the researchers to step out and resume the gas flow. They were enjoying it and didn't want it to stop. The researchers concluded the experiment after that, and they had to live with what they did after that.